You and I, Ben, and I believe you, Tommy, all played Maquette.
You believe me. Great to know.
Hashtag I believe Tommy.
It was a free game on PS Plus for I think just the PS5 this month, right?
I think you're right.
Maquette?
Yep.
Maquette?
We had to look up how to pronounce it.
And then we weren't happy with the pronunciation we heard.
We found a couple of different ones, didn't we?
Right, yes.
It was in British English, and if you believe the way they say everything, then you're going to sound like a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Megan was a lawyer! That was a terrible British accent. But yeah, we all played
Maquette.
the entirety of this game.
I've not played the entirety.
Well, it's 3 hours long, so...
I've played maybe an hour. I'm up to the second little area, near the end of the second little area.
Yeah, it's longer than I thought it was going to be. I thought it took me probably 5 hours total.
Okay.
And I did an hour session, sort of took it slowly at the start and then just barreled through the entire second half, I think.
Sure.
Which was a good... Probably 3 hours of just fucking around.
I did the classic honk it all in one go and get a migraine the next day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And become irrationally annoyed at some things that are just fine.
In the game?
Yes.
Nah, there's some bad shit in this game. It's not very good.
It's a puzzle game, and
It's rational.
The setup of it is that you're kind of walking around a 3D space. You've got a little kind of diorama thing in front of you, and you are also... in that diorama.
Yeah.
So in front of you, there's a smaller version of the world that you're in, and then outside of that, there's an even bigger version of that.
Yes.
So all the puzzles revolve around finding an object in one of the spaces, and then you can either drop it into the diorama, and then there'll be a huge version of it behind you, or you can do the reverse of that to make things smaller to fit places they couldn't fit. So
Exactly.
basically, you have all these little rooms that you're trying to work out how to open doors and make bridges out of things and things of that nature.
Yeah.
It's a cool concept.
It's a great concept. And then it gets a bit more complicated the further in you go, but I don't want to spoil any of that because it's interesting. It's creative how it sort of builds on it and takes it out of the maquette at some stage.
Yeah. They do the puzzles you would expect from that concept of figure out a way to this is too big at the moment, but you can't get in here because there's a wall in your way now, so you've got to find a different way through. And some other mechanics that come in different levels where there's gems that will be the color of a wall, and you can only go through that kind of wall if you're holding the right colored gem.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's you've got to put it somewhere so you can get it later and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The puzzles are mostly good.
Yeah, I love them. I never finish puzzle games.
Right.
I rarely do. I've played Portal 1 and 2 all the way through, but I often get to a point where there's something about it that's either I can't figure it out or I'm just bored of it.
Yeah.
Or the framework or the wrapping is not engaging enough for me to continue. So I always tap out at some point.
Sometimes it's easy enough to just be yeah, I get it.
Right.
And I could look up... I'm stuck on this one, and I could look up a guide, but that feels like it sort of defeats the point. This is kind of how I feel. I go, I've seen enough of this. I kind of get what it's doing.
Right.
I don't really need to see the very end of it to feel fulfilled by this. But what's also worth pointing out about this is that it has this kind of the wrapping of it is that it's you're kind of getting bits of a story about this relationship. So sometimes games like this are just you're here doing this stuff for seemingly no apparent reason.
Like The Witness. You're just on a weird island. There's
Yeah.
not really a story going on. You're just doing some puzzles.
And there's a lot of them that are you're in a sci-fi world where a computer is making you do it.
Right,
The Turing test and obviously Portal and a bunch of other ones.
Yeah, what was the one from last year? Manifold Garden.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Was no setup at all.
The Talos Principle, Antechamber.
Right.
I love this type of game.
Yeah, right.
As well. I didn't really like... what the fuck was that one called? Where a similar thing with perspective.
Maquette.
No, you had to. If you got close to a chess piece, it'd be big, and then you could move it.
Superliminal. Which I haven't played yet. And I suspect I would like more than you did.
Probably, because my issues with that are very similar to my issues with this, where the main thing is that these puzzles are physics-based, usually.
Right.
You are manipulating an object and getting it into a certain position so that it is useful to you when you go to that part of the world that it is now in.
Yeah.
And it almost always feels quite bad to move stuff and position it in this game.
I would say it only happened once to me where I was like, the controls are hindering me.
Right.
But yeah, the rest of it I was like, this is fine. This is like, every other game I've played in Unity or whatever this is probably made in, where it's like, it's a little imprecise, but
yeah, and
it's, the enjoyment for me is the stuff that is happening inside my head.
Yeah.
More.
Right.
There's some elements of it where you can kind of do things by accident, where it's kind of like you can kind of hop on the diorama and walk around it and then use like those gems, for example, to open the smaller versions of... But it's kind of... I think sometimes you can kind of do that stuff by accident.
I
like
broke
it doesn't
this
feel...
game 3 or 4 times, or maybe throughout playing it, by having a different answer to the puzzle that then wouldn't work because it wasn't the game's one.
That happened once to me where it was like I know, so I was playing with my girlfriend, and it was like we were sort of collaborating, trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
And she's not much of a gamer, so like she would often suggest things where I'm like, well, I know, because I know like game design, that's not going to work. That's actually not like to a layperson. It's like, oh well, that's probably that cog probably moves, so try that. I'm like, no, because it would be glowing, or there would be some other indication. Right. But there was one where we were like, no, we just got to put this gem on the top of this roof and let it roll down here, and then it'll go there.
Yeah.
And that's the only solution we can find. And then it was like, it's half working and it's half not. But the solution was something completely different.
And so there is one bit where you do roll a gem down a thing, and then you've got to lift another gem up to the ceiling where the thing is, where that color is, to let it fall down.
Yeah.
And you can move the thing in such a way that it doesn't quite reach. And then you go, oh, I guess it's not that. I guess it's too high and I've got to find another way up. Or you can make a bridge out of an object that, because of the placement thing... So the way it controls is you have one button to pick something up and another button to sort of place it in the world. So it'll like either be holding the object or kind of hovering it in front of you. And you can pull it towards you or away or rotate it using the shoulder buttons. And it is very imprecise, I found, because it can like block you from even... putting the object in front of you to manipulate it if there's not enough space in the game's opinion, which oftentimes it needs you to do that thing, but it will also tell you there's not enough space. So you know what I mean? It's like it's just real clunky with that sort of stuff. So sometimes there are solutions that you come to that you then think you're wrong about because the game puts a physical hurdle in your way that isn't meant to be there.
Yeah, it doesn't. Something doesn't quite fit, or or then sometimes you can just be sort of moving something around and just going from A to B and sort of unlock a thing by accident because it just happens. You just happen to be like hovering it over to try a different solution. And in doing that, you open that thing or trigger that thing or whatever, and it's like, oh, cool, I've done it, but it doesn't feel satisfying because you've done it by accident. You haven't you don't get the like dopamine thing of like, oh, I've worked this out.
Right.
There's a level where you've got some steps and you use them to move around. It is very easy.
Whoa.
You can go up. You can go down.
You can go side to side, but you're not going to get very far.
No.
So
enjoy the view, though, buddy.
Hey, if you love that particular step, then hang out.
There is a very easy way to interpret a broken part of the gate that is exactly at jumping over height if you put the steps next to it as the way to go over the steps when you are in the version of the world where you are small and the world is big. If you do that, you get completely fucking stuck in the area that you go into.
Yeah, I got stuck a couple of times.
There's no way to get out. I had a few bugs where it was like something broke in such a way that I was like carrying one of those gems, but it wasn't working anymore to open the colors that were...
Yeah, that happened to me once.
Had to reload saves. So like just stuff like that makes this... made it for me very frustrating to play, because the thing with puzzle games for me is when you have the solution to the puzzle in your head, it should be trivial to make that manifest in the world.
I mean, it should be, but yes. So this game is the debut game of a developer.
Yeah.
I assume it's a very small company. It's an indie company that was published by a large publisher, or like a large indie publisher, Annapurna. And yes, similar to other games in the past, has been pushed by Sony. Like in this case, it's free, so it's not as much of a like... there's not as many expectations on it.
No.
But I definitely...
It's also got more eyes on it than it would if
yeah.
it just kind of like snuck onto the eShop and,
Yeah.
and got a bit of word of mouth of like, hey, if you want a cute little puzzle game.
But I knew that going in, this was like, I was like, who is this? Because I love the art style, and I was like, oh, is this the Witness people or something?
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh no, this is just an indie developer, it's their first game. So, and I didn't find it frustrating except for literally one point where I was like, this is fucked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, oh, it's not going to be perfect. This is a small team. This is
Yeah.
not Valve making Portal. This
But
is...
yeah, having like, I haven't had any of those like big kind of frustrating moments, but knowing that it is a little precarious does mean that you're sort of walking around the world a bit like you
Right.
and going to solve something. I've kind of, even though I haven't encountered that feeling of like there's a way to solve it that's not the way to solve it,
Yeah.
it still does. Even without having that experience, like it definitely feels like that's the case. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's obvious pretty early on that that's going to be the case, that you'll be able to accidentally do something right the wrong way.
Well,
so
but the
kind of
problem
have a bit of
is-
trepidation, like going to solve things, because it's like, oh, is this right? Or
If you could do something right the wrong way, that wouldn't be as big of a deal because at least you'd be able to get it. But you can do something that seems as though it should work, but then the game will have some kind of artificial block to stop that from happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
like in games sometimes where it's like you've found a key
Yeah.
and it's like, nah, you can't get in, or you've got a thing that is the same as every other thing, but the game's just decided, nah, that one just for no reason doesn't open this door.
Right.
And it's like, no, but I've got a key. All the other keys in this game are interchangeable in the locks.
It has
Why not this one?
a touch of that to it at certain points. Some of the puzzles, there were like 2 or 3 of the puzzles that I really enjoyed. There's a few towards the end that, like, one's about manipulating objects in multiple different spaces at the same time.
Yes.
Which are cool.
Yeah.
But I did find up until that point that the puzzles also were kind of boring because often they were just like, yeah, you got to make the thing big as a bridge.
Right.
And it was like, it was less creative than, I guess, what I was looking for.
One of the kind of gaps in logic that I found annoying with the gems thing,
Yeah.
and I guess we're not really spoiling it, but like, so that mentioning you get the little gems that are color coordinated to doors that open the doors if you walk near them, if you're holding them. And
Doom.
so initially you kind of think, okay, well, if this opens the door when it's near it, if I drop this here in the diorama world, then it's next to the door, and the
Right.
door will just be open, and I can walk through.
No, you've got to
but
be
they don't.
holding
You've
it.
got to be holding it for it to work, and it's just kind of like, why? Like, it kind of doesn't really make.
Yeah.
It sort of doesn't make sense. Like, there's no good logical reason for that to be the case. Like,
Well-
within the context of the world.
Well, there's no reason for a gem to open a force field
Well,
door. So
sure.
it's like,
No,
well, you just operate
it's
by
just
the
the-
rules of
Sure.
the puzzle. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those things where you go, oh, hang on, I've solved. Like,
Right.
oh, I've done this. I can drop this here, and
The feeling is that you're trying to figure out what the person who designed it wanted you to do rather
Right.
than trying to figure out how to solve the puzzle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a slight difference, but it's a less fun one for me. To be clear, this game is free if you have a PS5, and
Yeah.
I don't regret the time playing it. Like, it
Yeah,
was,
I am enjoying it, even though, like, and yeah, you're right, Ben. Like, a lot of these criticisms are probably unfair because, yeah, it's a small team, it's their first game, and
Yeah, they're
there's-
probably going like, yeah, we tried to fix that, but we just didn't have time because
Yeah.
there's 2 of us.
Oh,
or
sure.
And the
something like
conceit of
that.
it
the
is
end
great.
result
Like,
is still the same. Like, if I open a restaurant and I'm bad at cooking, it's still fair to be like, well, you didn't figure out how to cook this meal that you gave me.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, yeah, I don't know how to cook.
Yeah. But if someone else eats the meal and they're like, this is my favorite meal, then it's not a bad meal.
No,
I
it's
ate the whole
just-
thing.
It's just a matter of taste.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, like, mechanically it just
I
has
ate the whole
some...
damn thing.
Yeah, if one person gets diarrhea from it and the other person eats the whole meal and loves it,
Yeah.
well, is the chef in the wrong?
I love
Because of the
diarrhea,
one person
baby.
that got diarrhea.
I spent the whole next day on the toilet and I had a fantastic time.
Yeah, and I do think it is a cool feeling, like, dropping something small into the
Yeah.
diorama and then seeing a big version of it appear behind you.
The concept itself is very cool.
The concept is cool, and I like the aesthetic, especially the opening moments where you're kind of just walking through a little garden and there's a folk song playing. I loved like the beginning, like 15 minutes. I thought was fantastic.
So-
and then there are other uses of, I assume, licensed music in it.
it's
nearly all of which I've hated so far.
I like the music a lot in this game.
There's one song I didn't like, but I think also these are like bands from the area that these people, the developers, live. So it's like people they would have known and worked with.
That's the other aspect of this game that we haven't really talked about. So it's got all these puzzles that make sense because they're all similar mechanics and they're doing this thing. And then it's got kind of pasted over the top of it this story about a relationship going through its life.
Yep.
And the two have weirdly nothing to do with each other.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, the puzzles are in no way thematically similar to what you're experiencing in the story.
They are sometimes very loosely.
The environments kind of are.
Vaguely are.
I guess there's one where he talks about a key and then you get a key.
Yeah.
I guess that happens one time.
But there's some that kind of sort of
or
link
he's like,
to,
I got to find my way out of it.
Yeah,
so
it's
there's
more
some
like
that link, and then there's some that are just random.
Yeah.
Like, it's very
Right.
inconsistent with, like... And also...
the world itself, I suppose, like the environments represent things that are in this story, but
Yeah.
what you're actually doing with the puzzles is a completely separate puzzle game.
Well, in the beginning of it...
which isn't necessarily bad, but it's just, it's noticeable.
The beginning of it, you kind of walk through a garden and you get this setup of this person kind of cleaning out stuff and finding these memories of the relationship. And then, you're being fed these little bits of this story while you're doing these puzzles. And I don't know, maybe this changes at the end, but it's never really explained or made clear, like, so what's going on? Are you this person in this, like, in this small world? Like, it's never really... It never really makes anything out of, like...
Yeah.
So why are you now doing a puzzle? Why are you now trapped in this puzzle world and thinking about your relationship? Like, it's kind of... I kind of would have liked to see those two sort of, like, linked together a little bit more,
I guess it's
potentially.
just... The link is the vague idea that to have closure on a relationship, you have to figure it out in your head, right? Like, the puzzles are like a representation of... coming to an emotional resolution in your head.
Yeah.
Like, it's not... Like, obviously, you can't literally visualize, like, if I change my perspective on this fight we had, then I'll feel better about it.
Right. Well, in a relationship, big things become small things and small things become big things, which is also...
There's
makes
a
sense.
game that came out for iPhones a while ago that I forget the name of, which is incredibly annoying. Yeah, that's the one. And it's about a relationship between some birds and some pigs.
Yeah, there you go.
It is not a healthy relationship.
Sometimes you, like, throw yourself into something and it just ends up crashing to the ground.
Sometimes you're a little yellow triangle one, and that means that you curve around, I think it was.
So, yeah.
But it was about a relationship and it was a puzzle game. And what a cool part of this game is that as the relationship fell apart, the puzzles became impossible to solve.
Oh, right.
right.
Yeah,
and so there are ways to make that stuff tie in.
More literal or more tangibly, yeah.
I think the reason I noticed that it was nothing to do with the game as well is because I was enjoying the puzzles more by a long shot than I was enjoying the story that is pasted over them, which... you enjoyed.
I enjoyed like the presentation of it, and the visualization. By the end of it, I enjoyed the arc and the actual story.
Yeah.
I did not enjoy the voice acting. I would say maybe that's the only aspect that I didn't, which is important when it's a verbal story.
It's very strange as well because it's Bryce Dallas Howard and Seth Gable.
Yeah.
Who are professional actors.
And a couple in real life.
Who I assumed were the developers' friends.
Yeah, right.
Who just didn't know what they were doing.
I kind of thought that at the start as well.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible job that they've done.
Yeah.
And again, like, whatever, criticism is annoying, but fucking hell.
Well, for professional Hollywood actors, I think it's reasonable to expect professional performance.
It makes it very difficult to get attached to this story that I also found to be incredibly boring because it is just such a standard relationship story to the point where if a friend told me about this and it had happened to them in real life, I would be bored.
I think it's...
Wait, a friend tells you that they went through a breakup and then they woke up in a world where that was infinitely repeating.
No, because
where there were big
he never says he woke up in the world.
Yeah.
This whole story is just about him going like, yeah, we dated for a bit.
That's interesting. So I played this with my girlfriend.
Right.
She, the entire time we were playing it, assumed that the woman was the protagonist.
Right.
Which it's never made clear.
It is.
To be,
I've been
it is
assuming
early
that
on.
too.
Is it?
He says that...
I've seen reviews that say that it's not.
I'm pretty sure early on in the garden he says that he is writing this letter. Or whatever he is. I'm pretty sure that early on it
but
says
I think
that
it-
it's
I
from
assumed
his
that the female was the protagonist too.
Yeah.
Based sort of on nothing.
It's
but
certainly that he has written in the thing, but I don't think it's made clear if she's come across the thing or if he's reading it out loud.
But there's a point where it definitely takes his perspective by the end. Like, you are going through this parts
Does
of
it
the story that
definitely?
he's describing. Well, there's the section, and again, sort of spoiler, but not really, where he's like, yeah, I left the house and went for a walk. And you literally do that in the game. That is the one point where it kind of ties into
Yeah,
what you're
that's
doing
true.
in the game. I think
That does
in the
happen.
garden at the very start, there was something that made it like, oh, okay, I'm the guy.
I don't know. I'm not 100%. I still think it could be that she maybe is reading his notebook or something like that. Because I think that, yeah, for most of it or a lot of it, it's unclear who's meant to be the main perspective because they are just kind of going back and forth telling this story, which I think is cool.
I think he tells it the whole time because in the coffee shop when they meet as well, you'd like stay with him after she leaves. You 100%
I don't know.
do.
I don't know. I don't know about this. Maybe I should look it up.
Because then at the
this might
end,
be annoying people.
At the end as well, there's a thing that he says. Look, this will be a spoiler.
Okay.
Skip 10 seconds. He says that he decides not to send the letter that he's writing.
Yeah. Okay. That kind of.
There's the smoking gun.
Good. But yeah, I think it's interesting.
But
This
that
not
is
going
weird
to-
because I do feel like it is for whatever reason, and I'd be interested to know. It's interesting that your
It isn't
partner
a
thought
one-
this, Ben. Yeah, I'd be interested
Yeah.
to see how many other people just had this gut instinct that it is from her perspective because it kind of feels to me like it is. I haven't taken in those cues that
Yeah.
are quite subtle, but for whatever reason, it just does feel like it's framed as
It isn't a one-sided story for sure. Like it comes at the relationship as viewing the relationship rather than viewing this guy's interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Because you'll kind of walk through the environment and you'll see things kind of written.
Yeah.
But then anytime there's voice acting, in so far in the bit I've played, it's the two of them together.
And 'cause
it's never just
yeah.
him narrating it, so it's kind of
Well, it definitely turns from that at
Right,
some
okay.
point. And also early on it's like we shared a sketchbook and like so the little drawings that pop up when it
Yeah,
animates
yeah.
this writing is both of them sketching
Right.
because it was their sketchbook together.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
My biggest issue with this is that it's very similar to something that I played and finished recently on the Oculus called A Fisherman's Tale.
Ah, yeah.
Which I think I talked about at the time, but it is the same thing. You're in a lighthouse. You've got a little model of a lighthouse in front of you. You pull the roof off the model, and then you look up and you can see like
Right.
outside. So it's combination of it's like a little bit more of a consistent world because the whole thing is like there's this big storm coming, and you kind of have to find your way out of the lighthouse, and it's narrated to you. It's it's a little twee, but it's a little more consistent and engaging and interesting. And I've just sort of done these versions of all these puzzles before with also the fact that they're in VR. So the effect of like a bigger
Right.
version of the world above you
Yeah.
is just staggering when you're in VR, like looking up and seeing this gigantic version of your little avatar in the game that is moving around, in the way that you're moving with the move controllers and stuff. So just the effect of all of this stuff is, for me, a little neutered by the fact that I did what I think is kind of a more impressive version of this game, quite recently. But that's nothing to do with the game. That's just kind of
Right.
what I'm bringing to it. Like, I think that Fisherman's Tale for me kind of does all this stuff a bit more successfully. But I do still like everything that's there. I like the puzzles, and I'm not minding the relationshipy stuff over the top of it. I wish it was all just a little more cohesively tied in
Yeah.
together, but
And the story thing is just a taste thing. I just don't find these stories I don't like it when there is magical importance put on a normal relationship because I find that to be a bad trait in real life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so it just makes me feel a bit when I see it in a bit of media. Does that make sense?
I think. Well, yeah. So yeah, my partner was like, "Oh, this is really twee, this story stuff."
Yeah.
But I think it's also very relatable. It's like, it's common, but that's the kind of stories that people latch onto because they've experienced them. So I think it's like relatable in its sort of commonplaceness.
Yeah, I think that's true. And just like, it didn't get me at all.
Right.
but it is purely a taste thing because it's just a story. And it's the same with movies and stuff. There are plenty of movies that are about that sort of thing that are good, and I understand are well liked.
Yes,
but it's crazy that everyone can be incorrect.
It is hard to do scripted beginning of relationship stuff well, because often when you're getting to know someone, you have your little kind of like naff twee little things back and forth.
They always seem a bit
cute to you in the moment,
right.
But seeing it written out and performed, it's like there's an episode of Master of None that I just fucking hated, where he's on the date where they go to Austin or something,
right?
And it's all this like stuff that they kind of riffed out apparently, and it's just awful. It's like if I lived that, I would think this is the greatest thing in the world. But if it's up on the screen, it's got to. It's hard. It's really hard to do. Like
very much so. It always comes across as like annoying.
Yeah,
and remember, donkeys can't swim. Right. Remember that, honey? You're like, oh, get the fuck out of my face with that shit.
Your little in-jokes.
A relationship is meant to be quiet. It is meant to be non-reciprocated.
Yeah. Your little in-jokes that you have with a partner, like they're everything to the two of you, but it's like, we all do comedy. Like you'd never go,
yeah,
guys, you're not going to believe it. Like this is what we call each other. This is our little pet name. Isn't this a scream?
Yeah.
You just, yeah.
It doesn't do anything with that story that is not commonly done with that story. I suppose is the thing.
I do appreciate the fact that
it is presented nicely,
had a crack, that they're doing something more than, like we said.
Yeah.
It's a simulation, it's a computer program, or it's just never explained. I like that they've had a little go at, let's also write a story and try and tell it through this way and have it kind of weave in and out.
It's presented very nicely, like visually very nicely. The text and the drawings kind of showing up as these little scenes play out is good.
Yeah, and for everything we've said about how it's kind of sometimes it's not clear like what it wants you to do. The ways that the bits of the story come in and the bits of text and then the bits where it starts, like the world will kind of transform and it'll start narrating. That is a good little cue that will pop up that you go, oh, okay, I'm in the right area now. Like you'll go around a corner and a bit of text will come up on a wall saying, oh, we often joked in the garden about, da-da-da. And it's like seeing that, I think, is a good way of cueing you like, okay, I'm meant to be walking in this direction and go. Right. Like I kind of appreciate that stuff is there as a rough guide.
Yeah. The music as well, I want to say again, I thought was really great. Like it comes in at good moments, and I thought every song in there I liked.
There's one song that I guess is like maybe a bit Pearl Jammy or something.
I thought it might be the bluesy one that you didn't like.
Just not a fan of that style, but the rest of it I loved. And as like sort of these quote like cinematic EQs or like, I don't know, creative cues of like scene transitions, or like you said, the sort of markers of what to do. It was pretty subtle.
What to do? The Maquette.
Oh,
the name of the game.
Maquette. The fucking Maquette's over here.
Hey, whoa! What am I in a fucking Maquette? Yeah, you're fucking huge.
I think the story in the second half is much more palatable because of what kind of story it is.
Yeah.
It's less cutesy and twee. And I liked that it went there. I liked that that's where the story went.
Oh, it went there.
But I loved it as a whole experience, start to finish. I was like, so this is like a 9 out of 10. The one is some clunky controls, but I thought it was great.
I'd love having a game like this show up on the PS Plus.
Yeah,
like love having a
3-hour thing,
something that would have gone under the radar otherwise.
Totally. As a like release style or whatever, having a 3-hour game ish that is free.
Yep.
I don't care at all that I didn't really like it, because I am very happy to have experienced it and want more like this that I don't necessarily like.
Yeah,
sure.
Because watching a bad movie is fine.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I'm not like pissed off at this game or anything, which would be reasonable in other cases. But just like the fact that it didn't gel with my tastes is fun in this case almost.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's cool. I think, I would admit that like not everything's perfect, but it's like these
big of you.
Very big of me.
And now it's very small of you? This is a crazy world.
These
now you're a bridge?
Now I'm a glowing red
you were
cube.
meant to fit in this keyhole, but you didn't at first. Okay.
Keeps slipping out of the keyhole. That's the keyhole's fault.
I like that these people have these ideas, even if they're disparate ideas. You know, the storytelling and the puzzles. It's like it's cool that they put this into a package, and that a lot of people hopefully are seeing it.
Yeah,
and if it goes well, which I think reviews have been positive overall, I'd like to see them do something with maybe a more hefty dev team that can fine tune stuff like controls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to wrap us up on this edition of Maquette Manor.